have 9:15. I would ask my colleagues to be seated, please. Good morning, everyone. It's 9:15. I will open up the Senate Education hearing. And will you please stand with me, and I'll have Senator Sullivan lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So we're opening the hearing on the first bill here, which is House Bill 1467. And I believe I have Representative Jamali introducing it for Representative Page.
Thank you, and good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm going to do something I'm ordinarily loath to do, which is to read this from my phone because my printer wasn't working this morning. I'm Representative Nick Germana, and I'm here today to introduce HB 1467 on behalf of my friend, the prime sponsor, Representative David Page of Conway. Representative Page could not attend this hearing today due to a child care conflict. He apologizes for his absence and encourages members of the committee to follow up with him directly regarding any questions from the hearing. He prepared the following short statement for the committee's consideration, which I will now read into the record. HB 1467 is a bipartisan bill establishing a new voluntary program, the New Hampshire Seal of Civic Excellence and Engagement. Under this opt-in program, school districts may choose to place a seal on a student's diploma and designate it on the student's transcript to recognize demonstrated achievement in civics. Its purpose is to recognize and motivate excellence in this essential area of study. The bill directs the State Board of Education to adopt rules to support consistent statewide standards for this program while allowing school boards and school administrative units flexibility in assessment. Under this bill, students earning the seal would demonstrate civic learning in several ways, including completing civics education beyond the minimum requirement, demonstrating civic knowledge through a locally approved assessment portfolio or other mastery-based work, and participating in a civic engagement activity such as extracurricular projects or student government. Critically, participation is entirely optional. No school or district is required to participate, and the bill does not add new graduation requirements. It simply creates a framework that districts may use if they wish to recognize students who excel in civics. Civic diploma seals are an established and effective approach now used in nearly a dozen states. New Hampshire should join them. Leading professional organizations in the field, including the National Council for the Social Studies and iCivics, the civic education organization founded by Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, encourage all states to adopt civic seal programs because they promote high-quality civic learning while recognizing applied skills such as community engagement, civic reasoning, and informed participation. These seals provide a concrete benefit to students by signaling to colleges and employers that a graduate has demonstrated excellence. For schools, they provide a visible tool for recognizing student achievement and highlight a district's commitment to civic education without creating a new mandate. The bill also builds on past bipartisan leadership in this legislature to strengthen civic learning in our schools, including the More Time on Civics law passed several years ago. HB 1467 is a modest, practical step without any significant fiscal impact that supports civic learning and recognizes student achievement in this important area. Thank you for your time, and I would defer any questions on the bill to the prime sponsor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any other speakers? Okay. Anybody in the audience who would like to speak on this particular bill? Seeing none. You want to go into executive session? We'll go into executive session.
Second?
Do I have a second? All those in favor of executive session?
Aye.
Okay. So 1467. It also is an FN bill. Do I have a,
I'd like a
Motion?
motion of ought to pass.
I'd second that motion.
okay, we have in the second. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing no discussion, are you ready to vote?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I have all to pass with a second. How do you vote? All in favor?
Aye.
So that's 4-1. Can we put that on consent, or do we have to take it out?
No, I'll put on consent. Second?
Can we put it on consent? Okay. Good. How many for consent?
Motion for consent.
Second?
3, 4, okay. Thank you very much. Now we have to
Moving
wait
right
until 9:30 for the next bill.
Who's taking it out?
I'll take it out.
Thank you, Senator Prentice.
Susan Prentice will take it out? Okay.
I move.
That we come out of executive session?
Second.
All those in favor of coming out of executive session?
Aye.
Good. We're out of executive session. We still have a few minutes, but 8 minutes before 9:30, we can take up the next bill. 9:30. We'll open up the hearing on House Bill 1574, and the prime sponsor is Representative Weinstein.
Good
Welcome.
morning. Thank you. Thank you to the chair and the committee for hearing my testimony today. My name is Representative Tony Weinstein, and I represent Rockingham District 10, Newmarket and Newfields. And I'm here today to testify on House Bill 1574. In our state, students with an IEP who are over 18 years old can remain enrolled in school until they're 22 to learn vital life and career skills. The legislature increased the age students could remain in high school transitional programs about 2 years ago as a result of IDEA guidelines changing. However, federal funding for free and reduced priced meals stops once a student turns 21. So the problem came to my attention last year by an educator in Portsmouth. She wrote, "These students lose their ability to get free reduced breakfast and lunch at the age of 21. The system does not support the student that is with us for that extra year. This lunch program is very important to some of these students. Is it possible to investigate and resolve these issues for students requiring extra years to transition to adulthood?" I believe this is an oversight that needs to be corrected. No young person, whether they're 6, 12, 21, or 22, should be expected to learn, work, and grow on an empty stomach. The legislature voted to ensure that young adults with disabilities can remain in public school to complete their education, and we, in turn, need to ensure that they have access to affordable, healthy meals while in the care of the public school system. This bill simply aims to fill that gap. We're not talking about changing guidelines, just ensuring that we are fair and that we treat all of our students equally. One more thing that I want to say about this bill, it's a bill about hunger and making sure that people aren't hungry and students have access to healthy meals at school is something that I'm passionate about. But this bill is also about dignity and ensuring that all students, whether they are 12 or 21, have the same access to the same services. The bill, as introduced, had some issues, and thanks to a bipartisan group in our committee, we were able to work with the department to get to a place where the process can work for the department and also making sure that we're in compliance with the USDA program. And that's all I have. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we have Daniel Popovich.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, distinguished senators. I appreciate your time. I just wanted to briefly say that the reason why you don't really get a lot of feed the kids in schools bills coming from the House is because we've been busy making sure they don't reach your desk, because most of the bills that are filed on this topic tend to be not quite justified as a good policy. This one is. This is a clear need. There are those kids, well, adults technically at 21 who age out of the USDA program and they are still in high school and they lose access to the federal funds. So when we saw this bill, even though the language was clearly not ready for prime time, instead of saying try again next year, me and Keith Erf, who's my chairman on finance too, and the bill was going to come to us anyway, we cleaned up the language. We put in a lot of work to make it a very, very great, good policy that we believe should pass. And because I am on finance too, I'll point out that the whole impact of it is estimated to be about 60,000. So the numbers were so low that it even got waived off from the finance committee in the House because it's a minute amount. So I would strongly encourage you to please pass this very good bill. Thank you.
Any questions?
Thanks.
Seeing none, thank you very much. Representative Timothy Horgan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So we had a legendary state rep. I'm Representative Timothy Horgan, Stratford County District 10, the town of Durham, and we had the late Representative with a, with a representative, Art Ellison, who famously said, feed the, I guess I won't use the adjective kids, wasn't that bad an adjective, but anyway, feed the kids. This case, it's feed the young adults. So I think, these students who are over 21 but still enrolled in a high school program deserve to have the free and reduced price breakfast. It's not clear how many people are actually involved, but if you're one of them, it's a big deal to the young people who are affected by this, and the cost is fairly low. I mean, I'm personally of the opinion we should probably give free breakfast and lunch to every student in the school system, but that's probably like that'll probably be considered an extravagant request. But anyways, I think this is a small step. It's probably like a fairly low cost. It's probably like a fairly low cost program, but if you're one of those young people, it makes a huge difference. And even if your family does have money, if you're over 21, even if you're even if you have a differently abled, you probably don't have much money of your own. So it's I wouldn't worry about subsidizing anybody who quote unquote doesn't need to be subsidized. So thanks. I urge you to pass this bill. Feed the young adults. So thanks.
Are you willing to answer if there are any questions?
Yes.
Any questions from
No,
committee members here?
No,
Seeing
thanks.
none, thank you very much. Brina Corp.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Riona Kaur. I'm the Deputy Director for New Hampshire Hunger Solutions. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit policy and advocacy group working to end hunger. And I would like to be here to urge ought to pass with amendment. This bill in the House was a commendable bill that both sides worked on. I do want to just highlight a couple items on here, is that those who are eligible for the free and reduced federal program would be the eligible individuals at the age of 20 in the transition program for this state funds. So it's not all the kids in the transition program between the age of 20 to 22. It is if you were eligible at the age of 20. And I did want to just highlight that, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions from any other committee members? You're
Thank you.
lucky.
Thank you.
None. Thank you very much. Anybody else in the audience who wishes to speak on this bill? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 1574. Let's see what time we have here, 38, about 2 minutes.
I think the end of the day isn't gonna be quite as easy.
Mhm. Okay, we have a few minutes before we have the next bill. Do we have time to execute? What is it? 38, we have 7 minutes. We are getting out of the regular session and going into executive session.
Second?
Second, all those in favor of executive session?
Aye.
Right.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion of ought to pass on House Bill 1574 FN.
Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Second by Senator Abbas. Any discussion?
Yeah.
Yep.
Motion ought to pass. We already did that and seconded it. Sorry. Things don't usually go this quickly in this meeting.
Madam Chair, if you go to the last page, I'm not talking about the bill, like the very end of what our packet is, it said, while the bill directs the state shall reimburse school boards through the general fund, no appropriation from the general fund is included in the bill. I did talk to the representative on the House Finance to inquire if an amendment would be needed for that, and he said that his conversation, correct me if I'm wrong, his conversation with the Department of Ed is that they wouldn't need an appropriation. So I don't,
They would not need appropriation.
that's what I understood his answer to me. And if, to the extent that one is needed, we can all just consult with Senate Finance. and-
But it seems to me if you're in school, you follow, go on to the whatever else is there until you turn 22. So I'm sort of surprised at this bill, but did you have anything you wanted to say?
The amount of money involved is extremely small, and I would expect that that can be addressed in the next budget process if it's needed. This is just a policy change in an off year, right? And we're talking about 60,000. The money's already there. And again, I spoke with the commissioner, and she told me this is the language that they vetted and approved, and I'm completely comfortable going forward with it as is. So that's what I have.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Senator Francis, did you have wanted to say something?
No, I'm just getting myself back
Okay.
in line.
Any other further discussion?
No, thank you.
Okay. So I have an ought to pass on this bill in a second. Are you ready to vote?
Yes.
All those in favor of ought to pass?
Aye.
Aye.
That's 5-0.
Like to make a motion of consent?
Second.
Put on consent. All favor of consent?
Aye.
5-0. Who
I'll
wants to take it out?
I'll take it out.
Sullivan will take it out. Okay, then we get out of executive session.
Motion to come out of executive session.
All those in favor of coming out of executive session?
Aye.
Aye.
We're out of executive session. And we still have a few minutes before I can take up the next bill.
Fifteen oh three. 1503. Thanks.
No, tonight.
I went this morning.
Did you? How are the lines?
I got there right at 7.
Oh, okay, in and out, yeah. Yeah, she's.
I wake up at 4.
Like, you said no alarm, or did you?
I set an alarm. I set an alarm. I should go to the gym. I still will wait.
Smells good.
And then gym, I timed it so I can get there.
You know what I'm doing it for?
5 hours on it? Yeah, you have one catch up there.
Like, you love it, like, fall. Put a little turmeric.
So I fall
So
asleep.
winding down, is very.
I'll fall asleep on
Yeah, he loves it.
I'm lucky.
Gross though.
If I get my second one,
I had just started baking. Like, I was
like
looking
last week I had to shovel, I shoveled the driveway.
dog, I told you, or I
Well, it's a hill.
didn't hop into
So
it.
when you have a shoot
So I'm
by
looking for things.
school,
No, but it's 11 a.m. Joints for dogs, and said bone broth is really good. You can see it's good.
what do you mean by well?
Like, it was good for you.
Oh.
It was,
Like,
you. And then.
that's why I asked for clarification.
Yeah, okay, no, not that.
I have enough stuff that if I fall, I'm not gonna get hurt. But it's a hill, so you shovel, you don't like bending down as much. You move the opposite.
Okay, 9:45, and we're ready for the next bill, which is House Bill 1503. And you're going to introduce it? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm the Representative Daniel Popovich Miller here to introduce HB 1503. And basically, I will briefly say that besides the fact that it passed the House on consent and on a committee it was on a consent calendar, what the bill does is that it addresses an important issue in our schools by requiring the department to create maps of schools to be shared with the various agencies that may intervene in the case of an emergency in a school. Right now, there is no unified system, and you have to have multiple agencies working together. And while some of them may be very well coordinated locally, we don't know that for a fact. So it is very solid policy to have the department coordinate a centralized set of maps that can be shared with every agency that may need to intervene so that it is easier for them to communicate in the case of an emergency. So this is strictly a, God forbid, multiple agencies need to respond to an incident at the same time. They should all have the same map and be able to talk to each other about what's going on where. And as I said, this was broadly supported, again, 16-0 vote in committee and voice vote because it was on the consent calendar in the House. And I'm glad that I came here just in case Representative Ladd wasn't here to introduce it, because it's a good bill and, you know, it deserves to be supported.
Okay, thank you. Questions from Senator Altshuler?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. So I'm curious where this came from, because what was there a precipitating event, or this is my understanding, at least, and I'm only speaking from experience in my own district, that emergency management and critical incidents teams do this at the local level. So was there something that precipitated needing it statewide?
There has not been an incident that I'm aware of.
Okay.
This is more about making sure that an incident like that doesn't happen. I don't want to learn this lesson the hard way. It is also based on Chairman Ladd's, many decades of experience and knowledge about how this is happening, and he's concerned that while some towns are well integrated, some may not be, and it really does make sense for the state to step in and make sure the standards are applied across the board. We have so many school districts. It's hard for all of them to do this by themselves without some level of support from the state.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Prentice?
Thank you. Good morning. Good to see you. Just a quick question, and the Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management here at the state, they have a whole section that deals with school emergencies, school emergency action plans. Has there been coordination with Director Buxton and his team?
I cannot speak for who exactly Chairman Ladd may have spoken to, but I do know that obviously that department is one of the departments that would be heavily involved in, standardizing and preparing the maps. I wish that that Chairman Ladd was here, because he would have been able to speak to exactly who he spoke with. But I do know that he did talk to a lot of different people to understand the need for this, and I'm sure that Homeland Security was one of them. He's done a lot of work before with them in terms of, securing access to schools and making sure we have funds to properly, secure our schools. So this is part of the same type of discussions, and again, I'm sure that they are involved.
Thank you very much.
Senator Altshuler?
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. So I see that this is not an FN bill, but it is asking for critical incident mapping technology. So is this something that exists within the DOE already? Or are you looking to get it from the agencies that my colleague Senator Prentice referred to in her question? So how does this work, and who's paying for it?
Well, at this point in time, I think we are expecting the department to be able to implement this without the need for additional funding. And if there is a need for additional funding, they are about to head into the budget process for the next biennium. And, you know, if there is a need for these funds in the following budget, it can go through the normal budget process and be included through that. At the time when this bill was created, it was not deemed to have a financial impact that justified an FN. And honestly, sometimes, even though I'm on the finance committee, I'm not quite sure which bills get the fiscal note or don't. But I do not expect this to be a significant expenditure for the department at this time. And if they anticipate such an expenditure, again, they can work through the budget process to get their resources.
May I follow up, Madam Chair?
Follow up?
Yes, please. So I hear what you're saying about including in the following budget, so the next budget cycle, should they need funds. But this bill, the effective date is effective upon passage. So funds would have to be expended before the next budget cycle, according to your effective date. In order, somebody's got to do this work.
Indeed. And as a co-sponsor, all I can say this time is that it is the discretion of the department on, you know, whether they can find the funds in their current budget or not. They can always go to fiscal if there is a need, but my understanding, and again, it is a limited understanding, I apologize for that, is that they did not feel there was a need to allocate new funds because they were comfortable doing this from their existing budget. I think they just needed an authorization from us to do this specific work. It was more about their, you know, legal authority to do this work, which they were lacking. So this provides them with that. You know, they already have,
I see.
again, the personnel to do it.
May I follow up, Madam Chair? So did the Department of Education ask you to put this bill in for them?
I don't know if they asked Representative Ladd, but I can tell you that there have been intensive discussions with them over this. I genuinely do not know whether they started it or Representative Ladd started it, but the department strongly supports the bill, and you know, the language was reviewed with them.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? Senator Sullivan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So based on what you just said, this is basically just setting up a placeholder for this fund, right? It's allowing them to create this fund. No money is actually allocated into it yet. It's just a place to be able to put the money once they decide how this is going to look.
Correct. This is giving them the authority to do this work, which they lacked. So at this point in time, before this bill, if this bill does not become law, the Department of Education has no authorization from the legislature to engage in this work. This just tells them, go ahead and start working on it. And like with any other work that we ask them to do, if they really need more funds than their budget currently has, they can ask for more funds in the next budget. So at this time, this is all they need to get the process started.
Thank you.
Any other? Seeing no other questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the audience who wish to speak on this bill? House Bill 1503, yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Tim Carney. I'm with the Department of Education, Bureau of School Facilities, and I think I might be able to answer some of the questions that were asked. Again, without Representative Ladd, I think there might be a bit of a disconnect. And so the first question, I think, was, is HSEM involved? And so we are working on an RFP right now for the mapping work, closely with Director Buxton and his folks. And so we have that request for proposal out to do this mapping of schools statewide. Those are due on Friday. And then we'll proceed with the selection process, et cetera, as we go from there. As far as the financial impact, the Public School Infrastructure Commission met and voted to use 2.8 million of the 10 million that was allocated in the last biennium for this work. Other components of that 10 million are used for what's called the SAFE grant, so those are safety projects at schools. And again, that decision was made by the Public School Infrastructure Commission under the current law. And I can't speak for Representative Ladd, but I believe his thinking in this bill was to simply clarify and housekeeping a bit to make it very clear that the department has the authority under existing law, or the PSI Commission has authority under existing law to do this kind of work. So I hope that might answer some questions. Any questions for me?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So it sounds like you already have an RFP in works
Correct.
that you're consulting with Commander Buxton
Correct.
about. And the committee is already pulling out 2.8 million of the 10 allocated in order to move forward with this work. So there really
Correct.
isn't any legislative impediment to you doing this work because you're already doing it, right? There's nothing in the law that says you can't.
Correct.
Okay,
The
so-
department is advancing based on the vote by the Public School Infrastructure Commission to
Right.
move forward with the work, correct?
Okay, so there's nothing impeding you doing this work already.
Not that I'm aware of. But
And you
again,
have the money.
I don't want to speak for Representative Vlad's interpretation.
And you have the money.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
It was allocated in the last biennium.
So this is happening anyway.
That is my understanding,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Senator Prentice, did you have anything else you wanted to clarify? No. Okay. Are you all set?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Seeing none, this concludes the hearing on House Bill 1503. And I think we have a few minutes. Three. $15.03. What about it? And we're back in public hearing on House Bill 1202. Now, are you speaking for Representative Ladd?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I'll try not to make a habit of speaking for Representative Ladd, but here I am. For the record, I'm Representative Daniel Popovich Miller, introducing HB 1202. This bill is making a small change in an extremely successful program from the CCSNH, which is the program allowing high schoolers to take early college classes. This program is beneficial in a variety of ways, and frankly, I do find CCSNH to be an amazing institution, and I've always been a huge believer in them. The particular change made by this bill is a very small one. At this time, the law restricts the classes they can offer through this program to classes that are no larger than 4 credits. And this bill has been requested by CCSNH because they would like the flexibility to choose the courses they may offer in that program without that particular restriction. And after discussing it, we found no good reason to maintain that particular restriction. We do trust that CCSNH can make their own decisions on which courses should be available through this. And frankly, if anything, I would like to see the program expanded from where it is, and this is one of the little ways that we can use to expand it. Thank you.
Questions from committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Did you, Senator Altshuler.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So was there a problem with the 4 credits, exceeding 4 credits? Were there classes that were 5 or labs?
Yes, the college has classes that exceed 4 credits, which currently they cannot offer to our high schoolers, and they did feel that certain of those classes were classes they wanted to make available, and they were unable to do that because of the restriction in the statute.
May I follow up?
Follow up?
So the restriction in the statute was not that they couldn't take the classes, it's that they had to pay for them. They had to pay for the extra credit. So a student may take more than 4 dual or concurrent enrollment classes per year, or courses exceeding 4 credits at his or her own expense. So this is saying that the state will pay for those extra credits rather than the student's family assuming that debt?
Correct. The intent of this is to remove the financial barriers that keep certain students from taking those classes. Yes. Look, kids who take these classes don't tend to be the kids that go to Harvard and Princeton. They tend to come from families with less economic opportunity than others. And we felt it was very important for them to have access in high school to courses that allow them to, graduate college earlier and, not have to pay that much in tuition.
Not familiar with the program, thank you.
Further discussion, questions? Seeing none,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much. I have a Chuck, and I'm sorry, I can't figure out your last name.
Good morning. For the record, Chuck Lloyd, Vice Chancellor of Community College System.
Good morning, Shauna Young. I'm the Director of Secondary Education Partnerships.
And first, thank you for considering this amendment. Yeah, just to hear some of the questioning up here. Last year, we actually asked for the 4 credit ceiling because we were looking at it as we had 3 and 4 credit courses. This year, we are back and we'd like to remove that ceiling because our curriculum has evolved. We now have LNA courses, for example, 5 and 6 credits. We have welding programs that are now getting in that 5 and 6 credits to more quickly get students out into the workforce and be able to use those certificates and credentials. So we are asking for the removal of that cap. What it does is allows us for those students who, we were paying for the first 4 credits and then, billing out a credit or 2 or 3, and it was administratively, burdensome, but also a barrier for some students and their families.
Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. If I recall, we had a bill last year, and I think you might have alluded to that, and I was talking, I'm like, didn't we just have this? I was curious why there was a 4 credit cap then, and I wanted to take it out, and if my memory serves me correct, it was Representative Ladd who said not to do it. Now he files the bill getting rid of it, so this is supported to
Yes.
move it, allows more flexibility in the program?
It does. Curriculum has evolved. We've now added courses that really package together and become the 5, 6, and 7 credits because of the certifications. Within CTE centers, they are required to have industry-recognized credentials. So this LNA, for example, meets some of those, as do some of our welding programs and some others. And as we look forward to some of our other courses and programs, they may lead up above that as well. So I had the same questions you did, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator Altshuler?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So I think and still working this out. So I'm concerned with the student taking more than 4 dual or concurrent enrollment classes per year, being a high school student. So essentially, they've left their high school curriculum altogether, and they're only attending community college at this rate, because I don't see where there's extra time.
Yeah, there are some, first of all, thanks for the question. There are some students who get to their senior year and have completed their requirements for their high school diploma and are taking multiple courses with us. In fact, when I was president at White Mountains Community College, I went over to Littleton High School and handed out associate degrees to a couple of students at the same time. So they are doing some of that on the side. So students are getting a semester, a year, or even an associate degree or certificate. And also, they have, there are other options where those students are doing it, evening, weekend, during breaks and whatnot. So not competing with their dual enrollment as well in the high school. So some of it's above and beyond.
Senator Abbas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I understood your answer correctly, a motivated student could graduate high school with essentially an associate's degree already.
Yeah, it's happening. It is happening now. It's not for every student. There are some students who, take that, 1 or 2 courses here and there to build their confidence and say, I am college material, and that is great. But we don't want to limit the spectrum of those motivated students that do want to go above and beyond and take more and really pursue a real pathway to a credential as well. So this allows both ends of the spectrum.
Thank you.
Senator Altshuler?
Thank you. So thank you for taking my question. I want to dial back to something you mentioned after my first question. So looking at a student, I'm looking at line 7, a student taking more than 4 dual or concurrent enrollment classes per year. So that's paid for. And what this bill looks to do is to have even more of their educational expenses paid for by the state versus pursuing some sort of academic assistance through the community college system. Is that correct?
Well, I don't want to
Because you said
confound.
the problem was administrative. So I'm just a little concerned that you're looking to the state to solve an administrative problem.
No, so I
on
don't
your
want
own.
to confound the more than 4 courses and then more than 4 credits. We're
Yeah.
here to talk about the more than 4 credit piece, because that right now is the ceiling of, allowing students, taking a course. Some of our courses are 3 credits, some are 4, some become 5 or 6, and it's separate. The other line in there has the 4 course cap, which would remain. This is the credit cap piece. So just keeping those separate. And we're not talking, we serve over 11,000 students across the state in dual enrollment. We're not talking about a lot of students here. We're, 30, 40, 50 students in those welding, LNA. It's really the exception, not the rule. But we want to make sure we can account for those folks.
Understood. Thank you.
Sure, of
Thank you for
course.
explaining.
Of course.
Any other
Sorry if I wasn't clear earlier.
There you
Now I am. Absolutely.
I don't see any more questions. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks for your time, Senators.
Anybody else in the audience who'd like to speak on House Bill 1202? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 1202. You want to go quickly? Going into executive session, so can I have a
Motion to go into executive session?
second? And all those in favor?
Aye.
We will be in executive session.
I'll make
And
a
we-
motion about to pass on HB 1202.
I'll second.
I'm sorry, 1202?
1202.
The one we just said, yeah.
Have an auto pass and a second on 1202. Discussion on it?
When we had this last year, Madam Chair, I wanted to get rid of the credit cap. I was told out they weren't ready for that. I'm glad they're ready now.
To be. Any further discussion?
I just think it's great that kids are graduating from high school with associate's degree. It saves them so much money down the road, and I think the more that we can do to help kids get a leg up as they're coming out, the better.
I agree, especially the ones who are motivated and want to move on and
Right.
get going.
I also think it helps those kids that are overachievers to stay busy and engaged in their education when they've already gone through most of the credits they have to graduate. I think it's good.
I agree. So are we ready to vote on O to P on 1202? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's 5-0. And consent?
Move for consent?
Second?
All those in favor of consent?
Aye.
It's 5-0. Who wants to take it out?
You can take it up.
You want to take it out? Okay. Senator Abbas will take it out. Move out of executive session.
Motion to come out of executive session?
So move.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're out of executive session. And we are
Excuse me.
almost ready for the next one. There are a lot of supporters for these bills sitting in here, and nobody wants to talk except very few. Let's see here where we go. You're getting ready, huh? Okay, it's 10:15, and we're opening the hearing on House Bill 1270. And it's being introduced by,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, I am Representative Mike Belcher, Carroll District 4. I am introducing this on behalf of Representative Dry, who could
Okay.
not be here today.
go ahead.
This bill is, it's pretty straightforward. It can reasonably be described as a housekeeping bill, a request of the department. The bill talks about qualifications for a part-time teacher to loosen things up just a touch for them to make some things possible that they would like to do as far as bringing in qualified experts and whatnot in different fields. This passed on a voice vote, the whole House. It was a bipartisan bill. If you have significant questions, particularly technical questions, I would defer to the representative of the department who will follow me up. But with that, I would be happy to take any questions you might have on this.
Any questions? Senator Altshuler?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. So what precipitated needing to make this change to the, to RSA 18939?
Thank you. And I will defer in the details to the department, if that's all right. But the gist of it is they wanted to be loosened up just a little bit in their definitions so they could bring in qualified persons to teach certain specific types of classes. And that's the basic idea.
May I follow up?
Follow up?
So are you saying this was requested by the Department of Education or the
Correct.
Superintendent's Association?
My understanding is the Department of Education was
Okay.
the requester.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions by committee members?
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you very much. Okay. There are a lot of people here with difference of opinion. Does anybody in the audience wish to speak? Please come up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the committee, and thank you for your time this morning. Steve Appleby, Department of Education. With regards to this bill, we did request this bill be brought forward. It kind of clarifies two specific issues that we ran into. The first one being on line 13. It wasn't clear in the way the original wording was written last year who would make the determination on qualifications, and there was some question if that was the department making the determination or the local districts, and we wanted to be clear with that, and it is the local district. The second piece, which begins lines 15, 16, 17, which subjects these individuals to the Code of Conduct and Code of Ethics. And certainly the question has come up, well, you're not granting them a license, what are you going to take away with the Code of Conduct? We actually would rescind their criminal history record check clearance in that situation, so they would not be able to be back in a school teaching. The intent of this was to provide a mechanism for districts that currently use community college or university system faculty to teach in the high schools, typically for early college, running start, those types of classes. Those folks can't always get a license depending on their background. So the idea of this bill was to kind of make that all legal so they could do that without having to worry about a license. So that was the original intent a while ago.
Questions? Senator Altshuler?
Thank you. Can you, would you mind walking me through the differentiation in lines 14 and 15 to the second half of 15, 16, and 17? I don't know, it's reworded, but I'm struggling to understand how it means anything different.
Thank you for the
Yeah,
question. It's just more, it's clearer, I think that additional wording shall apply to all individuals working as a part-time teacher pursuant to this section. It's just much more direct, right? The original wording part that's crossed out, part-time teachers shall practice the principles identified in New Hampshire. This now says it, the Code of Conduct and Code of Ethics shall apply to those individuals, which that original language did not say. It tasked them with practicing, but it didn't say it shall apply. Now it says it shall apply, which then gives us the ability to take action and sanction that educator should we need to.
I thank you. May I follow up?
Follow up?
So you mentioned in your testimony that the penalty for running afoul of the professional code of ethics is that a rescinding of the criminal history check clearance. So if a criminal history check clearance was done in one district, does that follow to another district? So if somebody was teaching in SAU 16 and then moves over to SAU 22, does that follow them, or do we start all over again, or how do we know?
Thank you for the question. Great question. First of all, just to be clear, it's the code of conduct that's actionable. The code of ethics is not. So the code of conduct is what we look at from the standpoint of being able to take action against someone's authorization or license. Just
I'm sorry, which is applicable? One
the
more
code
time?
of conduct is. So the code of ethics, the way it's written in state law, the code of ethics is not something that we can take action against someone's authorization or credential, but the code of conduct is. However, everywhere in our statutes, we put the two of them together. So I just want to be clear on that point, that a code of ethics violation doesn't always trigger a sanction because it may not be able to. But the code of conduct certainly does. With regards to the main part of your question, the criminal history record check clearance that I'm referring to is one that we give out of the Department of Education that is good statewide. So if they commit misconduct in District A and it's egregious enough that we revoke that clearance or we rescind that clearance, they can't go to District B because they no longer have a clearance. So
May I follow up?
Follow up?
So I have two follow-ups, please. They can't just start the process over again?
no, they,
Okay.
yep.
Understood, thank you. And then dialing back to the bifurcation of ethics and conduct, would it not be, if the intention is to make this a little more clear than it was, wouldn't it be a good idea to put that clarity into the statute that the professional code of, a professional code of conduct could result in a rescinding of the criminal history clearance check? Is that in a rule or another part of statute?
So we have, certainly it's an administrative rule, but we also
It's a
have, the
rule.
code of conduct is actually in state statute.
Okay, but
I
the
couldn't tell
the
you
rescinding of the criminal history check clearance is in rules.
Correct. All of the sanction related to a credential is an administrative rule.
Okay. And explain to me why they're bifurcated?
I would defer that to an attorney. When the code of conduct and code of ethics were created many years ago, my understanding is code of ethics is aspirational and code of conduct is actionable. So beyond that, again, that's where I would defer to an attorney on the difference there. But if a code of ethics violation is severe enough, it becomes a code of conduct violation. That I can tell you.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Prentice?
Thank you, Chair Ward. Steve, good to see you. So just to make sure that I'm clear, because this is not, I mean, this part-time teacher, I don't know, we want to call it issue or legislation. We have seen iterations of this over the time that I've been on this committee. And one of the concerns has been that there hasn't been anything actionable for, for these part-time teachers. And what I'm hearing from you, because they're not held to the same standard in terms of the code of conduct that you're talking about that the full-time teachers are. So by doing this, whether I agree with it or not, this change makes something actionable versus none at all.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, anybody else sitting in here who wishes to speak on 1276? Seeing none, that closes the hearing on House Bill 1276. Not ready to vote. We have a few minutes, we're gonna go into executive session. All those in favor of executive session?
Motion to go in. Second. Aye.
Right, so we're going into executive session and taking up 1270. House Bill 1270. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion about to pass.
Second.
I have a motion ought to pass in a second. Discussion?
Senator Ward, just for the
Senator
record,
Francis.
although this is, I have opposed different versions of this in the past, I will support this because it does provide it provides that action that we've needed.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
But I think it cleans up the language in a way. I'm still not largely in favor, but this is better than where we were. Thank you.
Any other? Senator Altshuler?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. We didn't get a chance to mention it during the hearing, but we do have remote testimony that have us with 93 people took the time to oppose and only 2 support. And I did not support this legislation when it first came before this body, and I'm struggling with looking at it as essentially as harm reduction, and when actually we should be repealing it.
Okay, so you are not ready to vote for ought to pass? on it?
No.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of ought to pass on House Bill 1270?
Aye.
Aye.
That's 4 to 1.
Motion for consent?
Gonna put it on
Second.
consent?
I'm not going to fight it.
Do you support consent?
Do you want to
I
put
do
it
not support it, but I'm not going to fight it.
Okay.
You can do it without me.
on consent, 4 to 1?
Consent needs,
Pardon?
consent needs to be unanimous.
I think we just did
The,
now.
the vote to put it on consent needs to be unanimous. The vote on the
Okay.
ought to pass motion does not need to be
Oh,
unanimous.
well,
Okay,
Do you support?
so who wants to take it out?
I think we just,
So I think we just need to vote.
I think Senator Altshuler just said she'll support.
I believe.
yeah, I'm not going to oppose consent.
Senator Altshuler, this ought to pass is 4 to 1.
She's saying she supports it till it's passed.
No.
Okay.
Oh, consent, yes.
So consent is 5
Yeah.
to 0, okay.
And you always can pull it off consent.
And Sullivan will
Darrell.
take it out. Okay, good, there's one more done. Okay, we have ready for the last one today, which is
Madam Chair, I make a move that we come out of
17,
executive session.
executive session, very good. All those in favor of out of executive session?
Aye.
We're out of executive session and back into the public hearing, and we're taking up House Bill 1792. And the prime sponsor is Representative Belcher.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am happy to be with you this morning. Representative Mike Belcher, Carroll District 4, here to introduce HB 1792, also known as the Charlie Act. So I sponsored this bill because parents have watched their children's classrooms become less and less neutral, more and more politicized, and generating more and more discontent among children, because they are looking into ideologies teaching what to think too much as opposed to how to think. Of course, the Charlie Act is named for conservative activist Charlie Kirk, who was tragically assassinated. The connections to Charlie here are twofold. First of all, tragically, the alleged assassin of Charlie Kirk was motivated by the ideologies that are sought to be prohibited under this legislation. And second, sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. Sorry, I'll move on, I'll come back to it. So this bill is simple and targeted, and it looks to be what the prior legislation that these bodies both passed should have been from the beginning in order to both be actionable and survive any court challenges that might come down the road. So it's simple and it's targeted. It defines indoctrination very narrowly. It requires that students not be compelled to affirm these controversial ideologies, forcing things such as critical consciousness or oppressor-oppressed lenses upon children through their methods of teaching. No teaching that America or our Constitution are inherently illegitimate or oppressive. It prohibits the use of critical race theory as a praxis and various Marxist-derived frameworks for analysis from being utilized as educational methods. So again, it's all very narrowly tailored to the problem, and it's not vague in the least because it identifies these items through multiple methods. Some of the problems previous legislation suffered was that it was ruled to be vague. And whether or not you agree with that ruling, I think there is some truth to the fact that there was some vagueness in the language and some difficulty in applying it. The trouble with getting this just right comes from the fact that, to quote Lenin from quite a long time ago, 1,000 pages for every theory. The pedagogy that is being talked about here buries the intent, it buries the effect under so much jargon and so much theory and so many pages. If you try to take an approach of prohibiting each practice individually, you would wind up with a bill that would fill this library. It would be beyond actionable. And that's kind of the approach that the first one took to this problem. So what you really need to do instead is do what my bill is trying to do by identifying the ideological lineages by name in the pedagogy. Now, sorry, one sec. These items are not at all unfamiliar to those in the teaching fields, and particularly those in the education colleges. They are familiar with the work of Gloria Ladson-Billings, of critical theory, of critical consciousness, and these other items that have come into our education system that were foreign to the American system only 40 or 50 years ago, but at this point have become predominant through the work of activists who took over the education colleges in many cases. So you identify it first by its ideological lineage and by name. And that's important because you can go to the actual academic paperwork. You can go to the studies that are done, and you can pull out these items, these terms that are used in a professional manner. So that's one way that you avoid vagueness. The second way you avoid vagueness is by identifying how they work and what they do. Now, this is the way you don't run into problems with prohibiting things that ought to be taught, like we ought to be teaching a history of slavery. It's a blight on this country's history, and it should be known about, right? We don't want to ever repeat something like that. But at the same time, so many times, these historic incidents, these historic injustices are being framed in a manner to cause modern-day divisions. And that is the thing you need to prohibit. We can talk about the problems of the past that are real. We can even talk about the problems of the present that are real. But we should never be looking to inculcate anti-Americanism or divisions based on identity in our classrooms. So this legislation takes a big step toward restoring neutrality by explicitly requiring the methods of education to take either a neutral or a pro-America approach and never an anti-America approach to education. So this bill creates accountability in a very similar manner that the previous legislation also sought to. It creates a method of holding those accountable through the code of conduct. The method is very lenient. It very much prefers teaching and correction rather than taking employment actions, though for serious and repeated problems, there could be, the department is authorized to take such actions in this. It also importantly puts the enforcement of this in the hands of parents by enabling lawsuits against it wouldn't implicate the teachers themselves, but their employing agency can be brought a lawsuit against with limited compensatory damages and attorney's fees, as well as relief, to prevent these things from continuing. Which is all very similar to what previous legislation we passed already did before it was unfortunately, it was struck down in the courts and it's currently pending on appeal. So this is common sense, pro-parent and pro-American legislation. It passed the House overwhelmingly because Granite Staters are, frankly, they're done. They're voting with their feet in many cases, and they're pulling their kids from many of the public schools. And I know the impression is out there that some people are anti-public school. I'm not anti-public school in the least. I want to see public school reformed and to do good and to inculcate good, positive American values and good basic education in the fields they ought to be concentrating on, from language arts to science and math, not division. Now, I am not going to go into the whole history I did when I did the House introduction of the same thing. I went through 15 minutes of the whole background that brought us to this point. I have emailed the committee a substantial and cited testimony. I hope you get a chance to look at, and that includes a link to the video if you want to look at the introduction in the House. I won't take up all that time today. Finally, this bill, it has garnered some national attention, media attention. It has also had a groundswell of grassroots support in the Granite State and beyond. And it has the support of multiple organizations such as Heritage. So I would simply ask that you restore education to what it ought to be and what it was for most of American history in our system by passing this by either unamended or with minimal amendment. I'd be happy to talk about any of that because this was very, very carefully crafted to be able to be upheld to the maximal extent in the courts. Thank you, and with that, I will be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions from the Senator Abbas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. On page 2, beginning line 26, it says LGBTQ plus ideology. Now, I might have understand what I think that means.
Yes.
But when you put it in legislation, it needs to be legally defined. Is there a legal definition of that anywhere, or is there a consensus on what that actually means, even though because we all
Right.
might think we know what it means, but some of us may have different.
Sure. So I can answer that in two ways. So first, within the field of education, it is properly understood. It's properly understood to be an extension of what is commonly known as critical gender theory, or even sometimes known as queer theory. And those are the items from which LGBTQ ideology is derived within the education field. And the second thing I would say about that is it doesn't, if you read very carefully, it doesn't prohibit talking about these sorts of things or these items. What this really is against compelled speech, against compelling people to association or violations of conscience. So it prohibits requiring students to affirm things or to say things that might violate their conscience. It doesn't actually prohibit teaching on these kinds of topics.
Follow-up?
But wouldn't that be a school rule rather than a teaching, if it's about what the students can and can't say? I mean.
So, well, I think that's one of the things we're looking to address in this, is that right now there is an unfortunate trend toward requiring students to compelled speech, to affirm certain things as either ethical or normative, or to say that I am an ally to this or that or the other. Now, this bill doesn't do anything to prohibit the teaching of, or talking about these items. It doesn't even prevent pronouns or anything like that. It only prohibits requiring students to use pronouns or requiring them to affirm LGBTQ sexuality as whatever. It's all about freedom of conscience, about freedom of speech, and it's about identifying the proper role of education of the state versus of parents. Because parents are the ones, and this has repeatedly been ruled in the Supreme Court, parents are the ones who have the right, the absolute natural right, to direct the ethical and religious upbringing of their children. And when we start getting to these items, You start having the state doing compelled speech that's violative in many cases of certain religions or certain conscience or association ideals. That's an area that shouldn't be, it should be off limits for the state. It should be a parental item.
Any further questions? Do you have another follow-up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the intent of what you're trying to do here, but if a student in high school is openly gay, not hiding it, you know, why is it, I guess, inappropriate for other students to acknowledge that person's open sexuality that no one seems to be disputing? I mean, I guess.
Well, it's not about acknowledging. It's not about ignoring reality and saying, well, I'm not going to say that this person's gay. It's about you can't be required by the school, which is effectively an arm of the state, of affirming that as being ethical or normative or any other thing. You can't compel a student to say, yes, I am an ally of somebody who is homosexual, because that could be violative of religious preferences. This is not an area that the state should be entering. It's not the same thing as saying, I don't recognize that that person is gay, or they're saying they're gay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Chair Ward, and thank you, Representative, for joining us here today and for taking my question or questions. So I trust that you're aware that since you introduced this in the House, that the New Hampshire Attorney General's office, the Department of Justice, has raised concerns about your legislation, correct?
Nobody's raised concerns with me, no.
So the Department of Justice is on record with concerns about increased legal costs and staffing needs because of the investigative nature of this. Although you say that this is very carefully crafted to avoid challenges, they are on record saying that there's vagueness and potential constitutional issues that do address or are aligned with an impingement on freedom of speech, that there could be a chilling effect on education and could lead to additional lawsuits and costs for districts as well as families, as well as the state. And then the operational strain, and this is the strain on the state, for the Department of Justice to manage this. So where you said you've carefully crafted this to avoid some of these things, they came and testified against this. I believe they may be here today, but this is what's on record for concerns. Do you have any response to that, or can you help to clarify?
Yeah, so first, nobody's raised those concerns with me, so I'm not aware of exactly. I can't speak to the exact details. I will speak to a couple things though. First, there is no way to craft a bill to avoid challenges, because challenges happen on everything controversial. This is not crafted to avoid challenges, it's crafted to survive challenges in the courts. As to the cost of things, though this bill is crafted and written in a significantly different manner than prior legislation was that's currently been suspended in the courts, in a practical effect, it's very similar to prior legislation. And that prior legislation and the enforcement and all of the items regarding that legislation was already in the budget. So there shouldn't be any strain whatsoever on budget as far as enacting this, because it's virtually the same in terms of the practical application in those regards. Was there anything else? So as far as the free speech issue, yes, I'm glad you bring that issue up. So I want to fundamentally put to rest this concept that teachers who are employees of the state in a classroom with children as a captive audience have simultaneously perfect and unburdened free speech rights and a right to hold that job, because as teachers, they are required to uphold policy decisions. They're employees. They're appointed members of government. The elected members of government are the ones who set policy that is enacted. Now, just like a teacher can't go in and go on a profanity-laced rant with their students, though they have the free speech rights to do that, they wouldn't enjoy that right simultaneously with being able to hold that job. The same ought to apply for causing moral injuries to children by inculcating critical theories, hatreds, and divisions. Thank you.
Follow up? So I have a number of questions, and I'm going to yield and let other people talk, but I just, or ask their questions. So, but let's just circle back to free speech. So I don't, is it your opinion that free speech just applies to the teachers here? What about the children? What about the students? I mean, what about their rights to free speech?
Yes, thank you. This bill is actually very carefully crafted to not burden at all the free speech rights of students. Students can say, it doesn't prohibit them from talking about any item in this bill. It's very carefully crafted to only prohibit being indoctrinated through required lessons, grading, compelled speech. Those are the things that are prohibited. There's no burden whatsoever on students' freedom of speech.
One more follow-up, and then I can turn around. So I'll turn it over to somebody else. So, Representative, you mentioned in your opening comments that there's this groundswell, and I am not experiencing that groundswell. In fact, the groundswell from my constituency is quite different. And what I'm trying to understand here is it would be great if you could provide, well, it would be helpful, I shouldn't say great, direct evidence of this indoctrination, any cases that have come to your attention or the attention of your colleagues where this is actually happening and becomes so problematic that you need to bring this legislation forward. Because as you've mentioned, we have previous legislation from 2021, and although it is under appeal, and I understand that you may or may not even agree, well, you don't agree with that. I don't want to put those words in your mouth. I'm trying to understand where we have this 2021 legislation that's already under appeal, why we're back at this, and what evidence you have that says this indoctrination is actually happening.
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much for that. So first, I have mixed feelings about the judicial opinion on the prior legislation. I do sympathize with the fact that there were some difficulties with the language in that bill. Genuinely, I do. However, that bill was designed to address a very real problem that this body and the House and the governor at the time took a policy position on to try to do some correction of in public schools. And this bill identifies the same problem. And I can go at length, and I'd be happy to provide an email follow-up with some specifics. But this began not just in New Hampshire, but nationwide with the teachers' colleges beginning, and you can trace it all the way back to the Frankfurt School when they came here, Columbia Teachers College. You can talk about the fact that Brazilian Marxist and liberation theologian Paulo Freire, who so catastrophically destroyed the Brazilian system of education, he was thrown out of the country in the mid-20th century, later went on to become the most cited academic in all of American teachers' colleges. I could point to the University of New Hampshire, who offers, not just offers, but makes part of their education, teachers' education degrees, classes on critical theory and critical consciousness that require this kind of educational training toward indoctrinating students into critical theories. And that is a technical term, by the way. Critical theories is the term that has been utilized by these folks for many, many, many decades. I could provide you with, and I will if you'd like, some of the documentation, like the Wheel of Privilege and privilege walks that have occurred in New Hampshire schools where you're dividing people by race, by gender. I could identify for you the recent walkouts where students are protesting political items that have no business being in our schools. That's not what our schools are for. Now, they can have their own opinions about things. They have freedom of speech and conscience like everyone else, but those things don't belong in schools, and there's no way that those things are natural, organic groundswells on the part of students. That's not what's happening. You can look at the teachers' union statements recently. They came out and they said these walkouts are required. That comes from the top of the American NEA.
Follow up. So thank you, and for your response. I'm still unclear on what groundswell or what evidence specific to schools in the state of New Hampshire, despite what they're teaching, or your statement about what they're teaching, those that are in pursuing education degrees to bring into the classroom. That's what you're bringing here and saying that they're being taught to do this. I have no knowledge that they're being taught to do this. What evidence do you have in schools in New Hampshire that children are being indoctrinated? What groundswell is going on? Because again, respectfully, I am not hearing it. And
Sure.
so I'm trying to understand why we are going back to this, reaching back in to the classroom and creating an even larger problem that again is already being litigated, whether you agree or disagree with it.
Sure. I've received since introducing this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments from both my constituents and those elsewhere of support for this legislation and what it is attempting to do. I've received support from those connected to the current administration in what we're trying to accomplish with this. As far as evidence of this in schools, again, I could point you to the individual items, the individual lessons, which keep popping up in the news, on social media. But just recently, a week or two ago, I wrote an article, it appeared in Granite Grok, where I analyzed the curriculum for SEL Week that came out of the Choose Love Foundation, which is taught in New Hampshire schools, and how this is introducing divisions in students. In this particular one, they were actually creating a dialectical model on the basis of those who they called illuminators versus diminishers. And they were utilizing critical theories to bring this into education in such a manner as to identify those who go along to get along and adopt their ideology as the illuminators, and anyone who opposes those ideologies, the diminishers. And this kind of division has no place in our schools.
So it's largely theoretical. Thank you very much.
Senator Sullivan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Would you believe, as the sponsor of the Universal Education Freedom Accounts, that I am often contacted by parents, and their three top concerns are special education that's not being met, bullying that's being ignored, and the indoctrination that is going against their family values in their schools?
Absolutely. And those things are actually not entirely separate issues. One leads right into the other. When you part of indoctrinating students into the critical theories, and I can point to a position article by UNESCO that was put out some time ago, talking about how you incorporate the SDGs into education and how it specifically is going to trigger cognitive dissonance to hold opposing ideas in the minds of these students at the same time, how it is liable to create a mental health crisis for which they are going to need to bring counselors into the classroom. But they have to do it because the UN and their SDGs are so important. We just have to do it.
Follow up, please.
Follow up?
As far as our colleges, my sons are college age now, and one is in community college, one is in school in Boston, but has friends that attend here. And they have told me they have to lie on papers and hide their values in order to get papers to pass. But would you believe that the Amplify curriculum that is used across this state actually has social justice as part of its curriculum beginning in kindergarten?
I absolutely do. And I'm somewhat myself familiar with the Amplify program. In fact, I've listened to a lot of their podcasts and what they do. There's a very common and popular education theory that's been going on for a number of years now that Amplify partakes in, called windows and doors theory. Now, this is an idea that in order for a student to connect with the content and develop empathy, they have to see somebody in the story who looks like them or has their sexuality or whatever else. The actual reality of windows and doors theory is it narrows the range of human empathy to only those who look like you or adopt whatever identity characteristic that you were putting forth as part of your identity. And this is how these divisions work, and this is where our mental health crisis is coming from. And we need to take a big bite out of this apple.
Thank you very much.
Senator Altshuler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Representative Belcher, for taking my question. So I did review the previous hearing, and I have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
Did you read Judge Bardabaro's May 24th decision? And were there pieces of this legislation that were reviewed with reference to that decision, so it would be different in here?
Yeah, so I think you're talking about the decision on the prior legislation, correct? Yes.
The one you
have
referenced
read,
earlier.
Yes, I
Yeah.
have read at least in part that opinion, and I have my own feelings about it. I think some of it is reasonable, some of it is probably not. But part of the really important thing about this bill compared to the prior legislation is the prior legislation, it rooted its fundamental principles in a somewhat novel interpretation of the Civil Rights Act. And that was always, I think, a unsteady foundation. This,
Sorry, what? I didn't hear
an unsteady foundation,
An
unsteady.
unsteady.
yes.
Okay, I thought you said unstated. Okay.
No. So this legislation, however, roots the fundamental principles in the serially upheld at Supreme Court parental right to direct the upbringing of their children in a moral and religious sense. So it has a wholly different foundation. So yeah, I did consider the problems with that bill, both as a part of that that decision and in my own understanding of it, and I developed this from the ground up to be very different.
May I follow, just to clarify, because I'm not sure I understood your answer. Is House Bill 1792 compliant with that decision?
I believe it is, yes.
Okay, may I follow up, Madam Chair?
Follow up.
Yep. So we had a second case, and Judge McCafferty issued a ruling in October of 2025, and you did reference that you used prior bills to bring this one forward. So that decision was based on HB2 from last year and the so-called anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion that was put into the budget. Did you review that with and Justice McCafferty's decision to reconstruct this?
So I did review in part that decision some time ago. I didn't develop this legislation specifically with that in mind, in part because I think that was a terribly erroneous decision. And in fact, multiple similar things, that DEI order, have in the meantime, since that was issued, been overturned at the appellate level and allowed to proceed.
At the what level?
At the appellate level.
Okay.
Appellate.
Okay. May I follow up? May I follow up, Madam Chair?
Follow up, yeah.
So what in House Bill 1792 is covered that's not covered in the 2021 banned concept law? Like, what's fresh?
Well, I would say the whole thing is fresh because
Okay.
it's fundamentally built on a different basis. And instead of identifying, as I said, instead of trying to identify from thousands and thousands of individual things that might be inappropriate to prohibit each one, it identifies them by their ideological lineage and by the way that they operate. So you don't have to have this long list of don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. It's just a general principle.
Madam Chair, I have two final questions.
Follow up.
Follow up? Thank you. So the previous bills were challenged, and the state spent an inordinate amount of time and resources defending it. And this one most likely will be too. So with those two prior efforts, I will assume, because we are both legislators and know how this works, that you know that the state is going to have to pay the attorney's fees to defend this. And why wouldn't you write in the FN that defense? Knowing we've had two others, so you have an idea of how much that cost.
Correct. And the reason that I haven't done anything further to address the fiscal note in this is because, again, that though it be very different in its language and the fundamental basis, the practical implications, the way that it is enacted, is very, very similar to legislation that was already on the books through the last budget cycle. It's already been budgeted for. So there shouldn't be any changes as far as the financial part of it. In terms of the other side, I have no doubt that this will be challenged. Anything controversial is going to get challenged in this state of affairs in our country right now. It's just the way it works. I also would not care to put a price tag on correcting education and not indoctrinating students.
Last question, Madam Chair. Thank you. So in reading the bill and with reference to the beginning of your testimony where you said that if you were to list out all the different types of pedagogy, that it would go on for days and days and days, or pages and pages and pages, and so you had narrowed it down to a few in this legislation. Am I representing your testimony correctly? I don't want to.
Close.
Okay.
There isn't that many forms of pedagogy. This is fairly comprehensive in forms of the pedagogies that are prohibited. What you don't want to do is try to prohibit every individual practice. Now, if you can, just for example, if you can imagine you want to ban, shoes. I don't know why you would want to do that, but you could just write, oh, okay, we ban shoes and this is why. Or you could try to do it by color, by make, where it's manufactured, by material, by all these other things. You don't want to go through the whole list of trying to do every single thing, because again, you would fill this library with a bill to ban every conceivable practice. What you want to do is identify what those things have in common and what the actual root of the problem is. So you're attacking it at the root, not the symptom.
Okay, so based on your previous testimony and what you just said right now, what do those things have in common? I'm struck and would like to know, in the first part of the bill, part 3, page 1, that the pedagogies that you have outlined are, and the ones that have specific people attached to them, are majority people of color. Kimberly Crenshaw, Gloria Ladson-Billings, Paulo Freire. Like, you've outlined, that we don't have, you haven't given us any specific examples of their teachings. So why them? And where would a Hegelian dialectical analysis fit into an elementary school program, or in any, I'm just struggling with, where did you get
I'd be
these
happy
and
to.
why people of color?
Thank you. So the reason that those 3 individuals are named, one of them is Brazilian, but the reason that they're named is because they are, to my mind, the 3 most influential figures in the last several decades of the critical theory movement into schools. You had Paulo Freire, who developed much of the theory himself in the mid-20th century in Brazil and then later elsewhere, that has been implemented in our schools through his works such as The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, one of the most popular books in education colleges, right? You have Gloria Ladson-Billings, who has been one of the most popular scholars and activists in the field. She had a significant hand in the federal regulation that brought some of this stuff into the schools. Finally, you had Kimberly Crenshaw, who synthesized Derek Bell's critical legal theory at Harvard College into the theory and framework of intersectionality, which allows all of these disparate theories, critical theories, to operate together under one umbrella of what will be called Volkish national allyship under technical terms. So these are the 3 most popular people in the field who were responsible for bringing this stuff into American colleges of education and our public education system. And as far as the Hegelian dialectic, nobody's teaching kids the Hegelian dialectic, nor the Marxist dialectic, any of that stuff. It is taught as a praxis. It's taught as a way to do things in teachers' colleges that translates down into the way that they apply these things. The dialectic is really just a way of dividing people based on identity characteristics. That's what it comes down to. It's just a complex complex academic term for dividing people by identity characteristics in order to develop what's called a critical consciousness. And a critical consciousness is just a way of saying a revolutionary outlook toward the existing social structures, identifying certain people as oppressed and certain people as oppressors in order to take the side as an ally on the side of the oppressed to overthrow the existing system and invert hierarchies. That's the technical way to look at it.
May I
One
follow-
more,
yeah,
and then we have
thank
to
you.
move on.
You made a reference to something of a Vulcan.
Volkish nationalism
Volkish
is
V
what,
with a
yes,
V?
Volk. So it's Prussian
That's a
in
new one
origin,
for me.
as Hegel was a
Volkish.
Prussian, as Marx was a Prussian. That's the origin for some of the terminology here.
Okay, so since on page 1, you've coined a term, productive citizenship. What is a productive what does that mean, preparing students for productive citizenship? And I'd like to know, because you've made a grand statement right before this in your testimony, that a lot of your, a lot of the struggles that you are having with education, your testimony is that they are coming from education teachers' colleges, or the colleges that teach our teachers. And not that we haven't heard any testimony about things that are happening in our schools. And you keep dialing back to what the teachers are being taught, and then therefore it must therefore be taught here, but we don't have that explanation. So I'm wondering if maybe this isn't just if you're looking to go into a different venue rather than the public education system, because to correct the record, teachers are not government agents. They are hired. They're not hired by the government. They're hired by our schools individually. We, as the government, don't do that. We do that in our towns. So with that in mind, what is productive citizenship, and how do you get there?
I'm going to try to hit all of those things. I'm going to try to remember all of them because there's a few there. First, just from my point of view, and I think this is accurate, especially as we are a Dillon's rural state, local townships are merely an extension of the state government. They have their powers, their due powers derived as delegated by the state government. They are a subsidiary of the state government. As such, teachers are effectively employees of local government, which is a subsidiary of state government. So they are government actors, government agents, government employees. So I did name a number of things that are happening in our schools, from the walkouts to the wheels of privilege, and the way that they use the critical theories. Specifically, I mentioned my analysis of the SEL curriculum through Choose Love, and I'd be happy to forward you that article as well. The reason I got into the details is because I was asked about the details of kind of how this stuff came about. Like, where can I demonstrate that this stuff actually came in? And the way that it came in is through the teachers' colleges. Herbert Marcuse, in his, 65 maybe, essay, made the statement that the 60s radicals should abandon their, well, at the time, they were doing a lot of bombings and other things. They should abandon the kinetic stuff, be done with that, instead focus on going into the colleges of education to take the revolutionary sentiment into those colleges. This was documented by a Marxist professor by the name of Alan Goetzman in his book, The Critical Turn in Education, talking about exactly how the 60s radicals went into the education teachers' colleges and they brought critical theory with them. And critical theory is not something that they teach students. It is a practice. It's something that they teach the teachers, who then put it into their practice, and they employ those methods as pedagogy in their teaching. I think I hit all the points.
Thank you.
No, productive citizenship.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, productive citizenship. I don't think we need to put too fine a point on productive citizenship, but it would
Well,
clearly involve
you
things
put it in here,
like being ready to partake in citizen self-government, whether that be voting or running for office, whether that be simply being a good tax-paying citizen who goes out there and raises a family. Those are all methods of productive. There's lots of methods of productive citizenship. What's not productive is to have a revolutionary ideology, and that's what we're trying to get to the heart of here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure.
We have to move on. There are a lot of people who would like to speak. And at this point, I have to ask you, we have to be out of here by noontime. So if you have a written statement, please give it to our aide over here. We all read them. Or you can give a very short summary of your statement.
Before
You have
we
another
go into the other,
question?
for the sponsor,
Pardon?
for the sponsor of the bill, I have one more question.
Okay, could you make it?
I can make it very brief.
Okay, great.
And I want to go back to, so thank you, Representative Belcher, for taking my question. So in my earlier question, I talked about the Attorney General's office, the concerns that they brought forward, and one had to do with the effect on education, because as I read this bill, there are consequences. Somebody could actually lose their job, and as well as there is a framework here for litigation that could take place. So the Attorney General raises this as creating a climate of fear. It's talked about as being potential for a climate of fear, causing educators to self-censor and avoid discussing essential yet sensitive topics, which may be part of, what your indoctrination concern is. But I think back, I just want to mention this, that I was remembering this, and Senator Ward, I believe you were on this committee. In 2022 and 2023, there was a workforce shortage committee that the legislature empowered to look at why we were having problems, like getting teachers. We used to, you had to wait in line to get a teaching job. Now there are signs out in front of schools that say, like help wanted for all different roles, including teaching roles. And one of the things that came out of that was the impact on policies, and that this fear of always having to look over your shoulder, being worried about everything you say and how you could potentially lose your job and be sued, is coming into our classrooms and impacting our ability to actually, recruit and retain educators in the state. Have you given that any thought?
Thank you. There's a few things there. Yes. So first, I want to be clear. I have no independent knowledge of the Attorney General making those statements. So I don't know that the Attorney General said those things.
It's their
but
office, so
okay.
I can't say that it was Fromella, but
Okay.
Attorney General Fromella, but it was Department of Justice testimony.
Okay, so one thing I can mention, because I was there for some of the testimony, I think I know what you're talking about from the Civil Rights Division. It was brought up talking about the LGBTQ issue, and I think there was some confusion there because this bill doesn't actually prevent students from talking about anything LGBTQ. It only prohibits the coercion by government actors, the teachers, whoever, of speech or any sort of assignments around things like that. It doesn't prohibit pronouns. It just prohibits requiring students to use those. So I think that there was maybe some misunderstanding there on the part of that particular individual who testified. As far as the climate of fear, I don't think there really is a climate of fear. But first of all, in order to have an employment action taken under this bill, that is so far down the road of these different steps that are taken. Before you get to that point, I don't honestly see anybody being fired under this legislation. I think that basic retraining and correction is going to solve these problems, and I don't think it's going to lead to employment actions. As far as the broader and principled issue here, I would simply point out that just like the government exists for the citizens, not the other way around, schools exist for students, not for teachers. And I'm more than anything interested in making these schools a good learning environment for the students, even if that occasionally means a bit of retraining or anything else necessary for some of the teachers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So like I said, if you have a written testimony, just give it to our aide and we'll read it, or you can give a very quick summary of what you want to say. So with that, I am going to call Representative Nick Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I am Nick Germana. I represent Cheshire 15, which is Chesterfield, Hinsdale, most of Keene, Surrey, Westmoreland, and Walpole. I am also a professor of history at Keene State, and I am a Hegel scholar. I never thought that that would be useful as a legislator until this bill. I've written a couple of books in which Hegel features prominently. I've published a lot of articles and essays on Hegel, and I was a visiting scholar at the Hegel Archives at the University of Bochum some years ago. And so it was particularly of interest to me when I saw the Hegelian dialectic listed in this bill. It was refreshing to hear the sponsor acknowledge that there is no high school teacher teaching the Hegelian dialectic. I assume you have the same rules in the Senate that we do in the House, so no props. I thought about bringing a copy of Hegel and reading from it for you all. And if I did that, I think you would find for sure that nobody is teaching this in any of our public schools. The sponsor spoke about ideological lineage, and that is a particularly dangerous phrase as far as I'm concerned. The Hegelian dialectic was built largely on the notion of the dialectic articulated by a contemporary of his name, Johann Gottlieb Fichte. Are we going to put Fichte on this list? Fichte developed his dialectical theory on the works of Immanuel Kant. Are we going to put Kant on this list? Kant derived his structure of his philosophy largely from Aristotle. How far back are we going to go? I could draw you a line as a historian and a scholar of the history of Western thought from Aristotle to Hegel. In fact, I've written an essay that does just that. Are we going to ban Aristotle or aspects of Aristotle because somehow they employ a critical methodology that some legislators put on a list of banned concepts? The author of the bill, the sponsor of the bill, argued that this is not a ban on ideas. Instead, it is about neutrality. It's about saying that you're not going to inculcate these ideas. But that's not accurate. I would also point out, by the way, that his description of the Hegelian dialectic isn't even remotely accurate. And I'm not going to bore you with the details as to why that's true. But this isn't simply about neutrality. First of all, just the title of the bill, it refers to left-wing ideologies. What about right-wing ideologies? What about fascism? What about the legal theories of Carl Schmitt? What about Giovanni Gentile? There are a number of people in our current administration in Washington who are fans of Gentile. What about Martin Heidegger, another philosopher that I study in great detail? Heidegger is the most important thinker in the early 20th century, formulating the philosophy of existentialism. Heidegger was a Nazi. Do we not teach existentialism because Heidegger was a Nazi? Well, this bill doesn't say anything about that because that's a right-wing ideology. Jean-Paul Sartre was an existentialist. He was a communist. So maybe existentialism does get banned because Sartre was an important existentialist and he was a communist, right? So it's not about neutrality when you're talking about ideologies on one side of the political spectrum and not dangerous ideologies against which we have fought world wars on the other side of the political spectrum. And where does the line get drawn? How do you determine the difference between teaching a philosopher and their ideas as opposed to inculcating those ideas? Are we going to come up with a special legislative committee that is going to trace out ideological lineages, which is going to identify the fine points between teaching something in a neutral way and inculcating an idea? What if a teacher is teaching about Hegel in class? Not that they would be, they certainly wouldn't be, but let's for a moment pretend that they are. And a student were to point out that Hegelian's dialectical theory is also the basis of a number of modern philosophies which rigorously philosophically ground the argument for universal human equality and human rights. Does the teacher have to say, oh, no, you can't say anything positive about Hegel or the dialectic, right? On page 2, lines.
Your 3 minutes are up.
Okay, thank you. I think that hopefully
Goes
makes
fast.
the point.
Do you have a written testimony?
No, just some handwritten notes,
Okay.
which
Do you
probably
want
wouldn't do you any
to,
good.
Pull it together and type it up and
Sure, I'd be happy to do that,
give it
Madam
to
Chair.
us so we can read more of what you have to say?
I will, and
Okay.
I'll provide some Hegel quotes just to, spice
Senator
it up.
Altshuler has a question for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question and for providing some historical perspective. So I actually, having you had already reviewed this in the House, I'm curious from your perspective, how a teacher would be on page 2, line 26, inculcating LGBTQ ideology. Like how does that matter? How does that actually come out in practice? I can see what the prime sponsor has some such as, but what does that look like when you're inculcating? And could be anything actually, LGBTQ.
Yeah,
title,
I think that
marks.
is, thank you very much, Senator, for the question. I think that is exactly the right question to ask, and I would say that's exactly why this bill, if it were to pass, is going to meet the same fate as the previous bills that you referred to. I don't think that there is any remotely objective standard that the Department of Education could issue that would allow someone to distinguish between talking about a topic and quote-unquote inculcating it.
May I follow up?
One follow-up.
Yep. So, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So there, mentioned in the previous testimony and within the bill itself is that these topics should, or any topic should be presented with a neutrality, which, I mean, in your opinion as a history teacher, if this bill is designed to prioritize skill building for productive citizenship, and that education should cultivate a neutral or patriotic disposition, is that not also inculcating?
It's the very definition of it. And if I could also just add, it says at the bottom of line 2, it says it also, some things have to be presented as inherently contrary to American tradition and law, right? That is also, again, not a neutral position.
Thank you.
Anybody else has a question? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Horgan? Do you have a written testimony?
Sadly, no. I might try to write something up and email it to you, although then,
You've got 3 minutes.
but then you may have like already executed it by the time it arrives. So I'm Representative Timothy Horgan, Stratford County District 10, the town of Durham, home of the University of New Hampshire, which was one of the many, many topics mentioned in the prime sponsor's testimony. Anyway, I probably think this bill should never have made it over to your side of the wall. It's basically, I guess he's sincere in his beliefs, but this is like just a totally unworkable proposal. So that's probably the first reason to vote against it. The second is, we talked about the fiscal note. We never heard from the Department of Education because, as they often did, well, not so much now that they have a new commissioner. Before, they were often refusing to fill out fiscal notes, and that happened this time. There is obviously going to be a significant cost. The Department of Justice, the AG's office, estimated they'd have to hire another attorney just to handle all the cases related to it, and that's a significant cost right there. So that's one reason right there, just not to pass it. I would like to thank the prime sponsor. He drew my attention to these 3 critical race theorists in particular. I'd actually heard of Paulo Freire. I didn't know much about him. I think Gloria Ladson-Billings, I think I once read a book review of one of her books in The Nation magazine, to which I subscribe. So I guess that means I'm a reader of the leading progressive journal of opinion. So obviously I'm coming from the left side of the spectrum. And Kimberly Crenshaw, I'd never heard of her at all. She's a very interesting person, it turns out. And actually, one of my colleagues, not the colleague he spoke, was actually one of her students at some point during her pre-legislative life. But I'd never heard of her, but I did go down to UNH Library, checked out some books. And they were well worth reading. I guess basically all 3 of these theories basically just say that education, needs to be relevant to the culture of the students. The students are not just passive recipients of knowledge, that they're active participants in the educational process. And Paulo Freire, the prime sponsor mentioned here, and in the House, he was kicked out of Brazil because he was so terrible. What actually happened to him was that in 1964, there was a military coup, overthrew the democratic government of Brazil. He was an official in that government, so it's probably not to his discredit that he left the country when there was a fascist coup and a military dictatorship. Okay, so he came back. So that's anyway, I just think this bill did not pass overwhelmingly. It passed basically on party lines. I think no Democrats crossed over to vote for it. 3 Republicans crossed over to vote against it. Probably more would have, but the majority leader was a co-sponsor. So I think the right thing to do. This bill is totally unworkable. It probably can't be saved. Although I did try to introduce a floor amendment. I was going to change the name to the Renee Good Act, and it would basically just consist of a fairly brief list of topics, all the topics that he mentioned here, plus a couple others that he left out. So I was just ITL this, and I'll try to write in some written testimony tonight before our marathon session I'm coming up. So thanks for your time. Thanks.
Questions by the committee members? Seeing none.
If anyone wants to see my amendment, I'd be happy to send it to them, but thanks.
Thank you. Representative Laura Seelig?
For the record, I am Lauren Selig. I represent Durham, which is Stratford County District 10. I'm also a former high school teacher, and when I moved to New Hampshire, I worked for the University of New Hampshire, supervising graduate students who were becoming teachers. So I have a lot of knowledge about the classroom and what happens. I've taught from kindergarten through graduate students at all levels. And I'm not going to actually read the written testimony I gave you. I will encourage you to read it later. I would like to point out that prior to my speaking against this bill on the floor of the House and prior to my op-ed, which you can find in Seacoast Online and some other newspapers against this bill, I spent some time talking with the social studies teachers from our high school, one in particular who spent 20 years at our middle school teaching U.S. history to 8th graders before he then taught world history and then moved up to the high school where he is one of our civics teachers as well as advanced social studies teachers. And he pointed out that none of the things that are mentioned in this bill are actually taught in schools. He couldn't, as a 30-something year veteran of the classroom, identify what some of the terms meant in terms of LGBTQ ideology. He asked me what it was, how would I define that? He could not figure out any way that that would be defined. He was very clear that certain things are very American traditions, like the fact that Rosa Parks said it's not appropriate to discriminate against me and make me sit in a different part of the bus or deny me a seat based on the color of my skin. And her actions then led to a massive change in how we do things and how we view people. The process of protest is inherently American. It's part of our culture. It's part of what we encourage people to do, is to raise questions about the way that our government works. We need to make sure that students understand Marxism, just like we make sure they understand capitalism. We need to make sure that students understand all of the different government ideologies, not to inculcate them, as this bill suggests, but so they can ask questions, so they can think deeply about issues, so that they can make sure that they truly understand why things happen the way that they do, so that when they get old enough to run for office, which they can do at 18 with no other qualifications, that they can come here and be able to run for office and represent citizens of the state with understanding of why laws matter and why they're relevant. The other thing I will say about this bill is it's yet another attack on local control. We, in our state, value local control. We value having local school boards that make local decisions about how curriculum should be managed.
30 seconds left.
And there have been so many changes in the way that we are mandating things be taught in our school system. We are taking away students' opportunities for electives and for choice to direct their own learning.
Thank you very much. Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
I also just want to say I really appreciate Representative Germana, because every time I tried to send him a question, my Siri kept changing it to, "Hey, Jillian." And I don't know who Jillian is, but apparently her theory is not one we do in schools. So
Kennard Solian. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Kennard Sullivan. I live in Londonderry, and I'll try to keep things brief as I know that time is limited. I'd like to tell a little bit about my story. I'm an immigrant. I came to this country in 1960 and became a naturalized citizen in 1965. My formative years were spent in what would be called the ghetto, or appropriately enough, was called the Brownsville section of Brooklyn. So I experienced crime, grime, corruption, prostitution, alcoholism, and all those kinds of things. It was a system where we lived in tenements, and landlords would burn the houses down to collect the insurance to get out of their, let's say, liability. I attended public schools in Brooklyn, And I could see at an early age, there was a big difference between my school and the other schools, let's call it. But I was lucky enough to get into a magnet school called Brooklyn Tech, and it was a pre-engineering curriculum where in your last 2 years, you took AP courses. I'm a taxpayer and homeowner in Londonderry. I pay my taxes on time. I have 2 children that came up to the New Hampshire public school system, Matthew and Andrew. And when they went to school, I liked the fact that they were instilled with a broad view, because later on in my life, I became a global product manager for General Electric. So I had the opportunity to travel around the world. I've been to Europe, the Far East, Japan, China, India, Southeast Asia, Australia, Mexico. I even spent time in the oil fields of Oklahoma in the oil and gas industry as a roughneck. When my kids were growing up, also in Maryland, where we lived at the time, we saw that there was a lacking in the school system, and some of the other parents and myself, we started a program called Helping Hands, which is a tutorial system, a Saturday school. Today in New Hampshire, I'm retired. I had a good life, I would say, till now.
30 seconds left.
And what I'd like to focus on this is that we need an environment where we teach the children the truth and have confidence that they can come to a worldview, because New Hampshire needs to have that worldview taught, because we need to play on a global scale. If you're going to deal with people across this country, there are people from all walks of life, as well as internationally. And to be successful, you need to understand their global view. You need to understand their cultural background.
3 minutes are up.
Okay. Well, I think the points were put out on the paper I passed around, so.
We have your written
Well,
testimony.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Deb Nelson.
Good morning, Senators. Thank you for allowing me time to speak about my opposition to House Bill 1792. My name is Deborah Nelson. I live in Hanover, and I am a retired New Hampshire high school English and history teacher. My multi-decade experience as a classroom teacher influences a great deal of what I have to say. I'm also a member of the Dresden and Hanover school boards, and some of what I have to say is with the unanimous support of my fellow board members. Both the Hanover and Dresden boards oppose any legislation that weakens local school district control, limits equal access to a free and appropriate education for all students, or imposes unfunded mandates, particularly when those mandates have budgetary implications. As we can all agree, this bill will weaken local school district control over curriculum. And it also limits equal access to an appropriate education. Of even greater concern is the threat that hangs over the heads of our teachers, given how vague and problematic the language is. I have to confess to a bit of what Yogi Berra famously referred to as deja vu all over again, as this bill is, as you guys have discussed, a twin of House Bill 544, the infamous Divisive Concepts Bill, which, as we've discussed, ended up in court and cost a significant amount of money to litigate. At that time, the Dresden board unanimously voted to oppose the bill on the grounds of an unconstitutional restriction of free speech, impingement on local control, violating our core mission, and placing an undue burden on teachers, staff, and administrators, as we are a two-state school district working to meet, at times, conflicting requirements. Those many years ago, I came to Concord to testify against that bill, and I find the language of that testimony serves me well today. I would like to speak as a recently retired public high school teacher For almost 30 years, I taught American Studies at Lebanon High School. Students questioned, reflected, researched, read, argued with one another and with me, discussed and came to an understanding of the complexity of American history. There was no subversive ideology involved, just thinking and learning and growing. I want to assure you that in 30 years, I had never had a single student who thought these lessons problematic. I was never reproached by a parent. I never had someone threaten me with a
30
lawsuit.
seconds left.
And I have to say, thank goodness. As someone who has spent decades with high school students, I want to reassure you that they are not as easily influenced as you fear. Talk to any parent, and you will hear stories of stubborn resistance, if not outright defiance. You will hear of teachers who ignore warnings and do dumb stuff. We all know about the prefrontal lobe and distractions that are now exacerbated by social media and concerns about the state of the world.
Time is up.
Okay, I'm just going to finish my sentence. In short, we know that so much of what we teach is forgotten, but what sticks is learning how to question, learning how to do the research to understand, learning how to express oneself in writing and speech, and how to think critically. Notice not critical theory. Think critically. I know we all value those skills and think it's important, and I invite you to partner with teachers and school districts rather than attack them. Because this bill is likely to end up in court and cost money, because this bill needlessly threatens teachers and school districts, because this bill violates local control, and because this is just a bad bill, I urge you to vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Altshuler has a question.
Yes,
Will you take a question?
absolutely.
Thank you very much. So on page 2 of the bill, you have it in front of you. As a teacher, in your experience and opinion, I'm reading lines 18, 19, and 20 on page 2. It says teaching or advocating that American societal structures, including the U.S. Constitution or legal system, are inherently illegitimate or designed to perpetuate oppression based on race, gender, sexual orientation. I mean, as a history teacher, was not the U.S. Constitution specifically written out? Didn't we write out an entire race of people as being eligible for citizenry?
And women.
So,
And women. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and more.
thank you for pointing that out. So this bill would make that part of your lesson plan unreachable.
Well, fortunately, I always taught in school districts that weren't messing with this. I mean, teaching the Constitution was assumed to be something I knew how to do. And yes, this bill as written would suggest you shouldn't talk about women being left out. And I don't think a single one of you would agree, Senator Ward, that you should be omitted from a discussion of the Constitution.
Thank you.
Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Chair Warden, and thank you, Ms. Nelson, for taking my question. So being a school board member, especially looking at the dual nature of the Dresden District, I had made some comments earlier about the effect that legislation like this and the previous legislation that you cited by exact number from 2021 can have on the classroom and the study committee that was done to look at what's causing the shortages. Okay? Is it your opinion, or have you had any, maybe, let me rephrase this, has it been your experience that this type of legislation, what we've passed and the proposal of this, could have had and could have an impact on recruiting teachers to support, and most importantly, our children in the classrooms?
Absolutely. I mentored a teacher at my former high school who I taught in my classroom, and she told me unequivocally there were subjects she felt she could not teach. This was with the previous bill, and these bills have the effect of silencing faculty, of making them more cautious, worried that somebody's going to file a suit against them, and that language is part of this bill. Lawsuits, $10,000 penalties. Yep, it'll make it harder.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none,
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're running very late here, so either you have a written testimony that you will give to our aide, or you can summarize what you want to say in 2 minutes. Name, what town you live in, and why you oppose or support this bill. So with that,
Sorry,
Ken Barnes,
excuse me, Madam Chair, how many people do we have left?
pardon?
How many people do we have left to
We have,
testify that want to speak on the list?
5, 6, 7.
7 people? Oh, and there's another page.
No, that thing is, we have 7 more people who would like
There's-
to speak.
There's a page, I guess.
Okay, we have a 3rd page.
Could you please, throughout this hearing, you have made comments from your seat. I'm just going to ask you, if you have comments, can you wait until it's your turn to speak instead of speaking over?
I think what we're going to have to do, we can hear a couple more people, and then we can recess the hearing and take it up next Tuesday. So that's an option. And I
So,
think that will have to be an option because there are too many speakers to finish up in like noontime today.
Okay, I've just been made aware that the clock on the wall is not correct. It's a
Well, I
little
have my-
slow, and so I know, I just realized and I was not looking. So can, with respect to the other people that are testifying and that we are going to recess, can we please give everybody the 3 minutes that was afforded the previous speakers? I understand we have to leave the room, but since we're going to be recessing anyway,
Yes.
the people who are going to speak in the next 15 minutes,
Right.
that we afford them the 3 minutes that the previous
Yes,
speakers were
They can have
allowed.
the 3 minutes.
Thank you.
in
That
The
was-
next 15 minutes.
Madam Chair, I'll be very brief. If there's someone here that can't make it next Tuesday, that'd be signed up to speak, perhaps take them.
That's sort of an unfair question, isn't it?
They could be lying, but.
Well, I think I'll go with the first, I'm going to call the next couple of people, and you have 3 minutes. And again, summarize it, don't go into great detail. If you have a written testimony, please give it to us, we can read it. So I said Ken Barnes. Barris? No, it's Barnes. Okay. Sean Locke.
Good morning, all. I'll try to speak in double time. Chair Ward, members of the Senate Education Committee, I'm Senior Assistant Attorney General Sean Locke on behalf of the Department of Justice, where I lead our Civil Rights Unit. Fortunately, I was also the attorney who testified at the House. I do believe my testimony has been mischaracterized. The Department of Justice opposes House Bill 1792 as written because it presents constitutional concerns and risks conflict with other laws. I will note that this is different than the position we took in the House, but we've had more time to review the law, compare it to the court orders and previous decisions, as well as receive input from stakeholders, and that has prompted the change in our position. To Senator Abbas's points when he was speaking with the sponsor, I want to focus on page 2, lines 26 to 28, because I think it's a microcosm of the 2 issues that I want to raise here. First, when it comes to constitutional challenges, the issue is often a question of vagueness. To illustrate this, in that particular section, it prohibits requiring affirming LGBTQ+ people. The concern here is going to be, what is affirmation? Is requiring a student to treat another person, an LGBTQ+ person, with dignity and respect, affirmation of that person's identity? Or does it require more? Does it require endorsing or supporting a particular sexual orientation, gender identity, or transgender status? What is the foundation of affirmation to make this a violation? These are questions that are significant because they are going to be the basis of the challenge. And our concern is that those might be viable challenges. So to the point of the conflict of laws, state law also prohibits discrimination in K-12 public education on the basis of sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Together, those 2 laws, this proposed law and the existing law, create a tension that places teachers and schools in a catch-22, where they may feel incapable of redressing discriminatory bullying or harassment of a gay, lesbian, or transgender student or staff member for fear that they'll be accused of requiring a student to affirm that person's sexual orientation or gender identity. And I want to clarify something that appears to have been an issue when I spoke previously to the House. This concern is far more basic than names and pronouns. When I've discussed this with the Attorney General, our biggest concern was students calling each other slurs, making derogatory comments, and taking other hostile acts targeting LGBTQ+ people. The concern here isn't abstract. data shows that identity-based misconduct leads to more extreme negative outcomes for students, including absenteeism, substance use, and negative mental health outcomes. And that this data is when compared to students who are being affected by bullying for their non-identity-based characteristics. I had a few bullet points from previous testimony. First, some of the issues with the court orders where this hasn't addressed that. There's no scienter requirement in this law, and that was a big focus of Judge Barbadora's order, that there needs to be an intent to violate the law with the consequences that are at play with what is proposed here.
30 seconds.
Second, to the point of budgeting, this is not what was budgeted for in House Bill 1 and 2 of last year. This is added, even the DEI language of last year added additional duties to the department that weren't necessarily accounted for in our budget in House Bill 1 last year. So there would be additional expense regardless. And third, skipping that point. As a final kind of closing point here, the department condemns any form of violence targeting others as well as any form of discrimination and would be willing to work with stakeholders to develop legislation that protects students and the public. But the litigation risk and conflict of laws lead us to oppose this legislation as is written. For these reasons, the department recommends that the committee ITL this legislation or refer it for interim study, and I'm happy to take any questions. And I made 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. We have any burning questions from the, say yes, Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Attorney Long, for taking my question. I'm wildly curious, when you flipped and said, I'm going to skip this, what did you skip?
I just had a couple of points that didn't come up quite in the same way, because it was a second point on our budget, and I would make a point here that, to the point of kind of this groundswell of complaints, as we kind of disclosed in the Mejia case, which is the lawsuit challenging the divisive concepts law, there was only one charge of discrimination ever filed under that law before it was enjoined. There was no lawsuit filed in state court, which people had the right to do. There were no complaints filed with the Department of Justice, which people had the right to do. There was one charge of legitimate charge. There were a bunch of frivolous, like fake ones accusing, people of things like, we had a whole fact pattern based on the Karate Kid. And so that was kind of in the complaint, but there was only one that actually alleged a potential violation.
May I follow up?
Can Senator Abbas ask a question and then you can do a follow-up?
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. The existing law in the books today, although I didn't agree with the court that it was vague, I thought it was kind of more narrow on like what you can and can't do. Is there any concerns on this being content-based, going maybe too far? And I think the title, although that won't affect the application of law, when it says, revolutionary leftist indoctrination, not, as a member of the right, I will say that it's referencing content, I guess is my point. So that's going to go to it can't be ignored even though it doesn't affect the application.
Right. I think that's definitely going to be part of a challenge. I know in the previous litigation, we had taken the position that as kind of educators, because they are government employees, they don't have the same First Amendment rights to kind of say what they want. It's the policymakers who decide what the curriculum is going to be. But I do think the framing of this legislation might be an impact on kind of, is there an intent behind this, and kind of it'll inform how the courts are going to read this.
Thank you.
Follow-up for Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So with respect to the what you had said prior to Senator Abbas's question, there is not a groundswell of cases coming into your office alleging what this bill would propose to address?
There wasn't with the previous legislation that was in effect for several months before it was enjoined. I can't speak to kind of what's happened since it was enjoined, because since then I imagine many people have not bothered filing those types of complaints with us or with other responding agencies.
Okay, and may I follow up?
Follow-up.
I have in my notes here, we're waiting for the First Circuit to issue a decision.
Correct.
Correct? So, do you have any?
I have no timeline.
I don't know.
Courts move at the speed
Play
they want
that
to
party
move.
game where when will the courts deal with the thing?
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't know, but nonetheless, we're still waiting, and it might be a little bit imprudent to jump the gun before we get some clarification.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rebecca Hoskins. Okay, so you have 3 minutes.
And I don't have my written testimony printed, but can I?
Pardon?
I don't have my written testimony printed, but can I email?
Absolutely.
Excellent. So thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Senate Education Committee. My name is Rebecca Hoskins, and I currently reside in Concord. I've come to speak to you to ardently oppose this bill. This bill is a solution looking for a problem that stands to hurt both students and teachers in the process. I am a disabled, queer, gender nonconforming person and a lifelong resident of New Hampshire. I grew up in our state's public school system between 2000 to 2012. I then went on to study higher education at Plymouth State University, studying English education. I am an expert on how the system works from the inside and out. I have had 504 plans and IEPs. I explored and came to terms with my sexuality and identity in a time when society's understanding of things like the LGBTQ community was rapidly changing and expanding, and I have received higher education to become an educator in this state. Growing up in New Hampshire schools with the intersectional identity that I have was an extreme struggle. The bullying began immediately in elementary school because I was visibly disabled. I was ostracized immediately, and the other ways I differed from my peers only widened the gulf as I grew. The bullying got worse as I went through middle school and began to explore my sexuality and gender identity. It also became physical. There were multiple times I was beaten by groups of classmates. I stopped wanting to go to school. I stopped wanting to leave the house. I stopped wanting to live. I was 12. Thankfully, in middle school, I had a few safe teachers who, although they didn't speak openly about their views or identities, made it clear to me that there was nothing wrong with me, my feelings, or my questions. Those teachers were the only saving grace in what was otherwise hell. I spent most free periods I had hiding in one of their classrooms. They never instilled or indoctrinated me with anti-American sentiment because of what I was suffering. They gave me a safe space to be a child. By the time I entered high school, policies were beginning to catch up with the times. I was bullied less and less as my identity was normalized for those around me. I was able to openly discuss as matter of fact, for the first time, we could acknowledge LGBTQ people exist, have always existed, and are people in our communities. By the time I graduated in 2012, my disability and sexuality were no longer mentioned by my classmates. Some things need to be normalized. You don't have to agree with everything, but we cannot go back to a time where everyone was bullying over identities.
30 seconds.
And as somebody who went and received higher education to be an educator in this state, I was taught theories, but I was taught them so that I could understand how all the different ways the English word can be approached potentially by students in a classroom. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from the audience, from the members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. I have just received a message that we can stay a little later in this room. But we are sort of renting this room, so you have to be careful about what the rules are here. Emily Hunt. So that's your testimony?
Yes.
Okay,
yes, my
you
written
can summarize it, right?
Yes, and it should be under 3 minutes either way. So whenever you're ready. Okay, bear with me. This is my first time testifying. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Emily Hunt. I'm a student at UNH, and I'm here to testify in opposition of House Bill 1792. I'll be testifying today about how this bill inexplicably harms queer students. Now, this testimony in a way mirrors the past too, but I think it will only add to the opposition here today. To start, I am queer. I first remember learning about queer identities when an elementary school teacher of mine explained that some people have two moms, some people have two dads, some girls like girls, some boys like boys, and some people aren't quite a boy or a girl. It was a matter-of-fact statement, not affirming or denying the normality or ethics of being queer. However, as I got older and I began to struggle with the reality of my own queer identity, it was the voices of support from those around me, including my teachers, that made me feel like I belonged. To be clear, they did not make me gay, but instead made me feel safe and accepted at school so I could excel. But if this bill were to pass, educators would no longer be able to support queer students without fearing the loss of their jobs. If educators can't compel students to affirm other queer identities, how do you expect to protect gay students from bullying? Under this bill, bullies cannot be told to respect a gay student's identity, as that would be affirming that LGBTQ identities are normative or ethical. So what tools is an educator left with to inhibit bullying of queer students? You can't just expect a just go sit down kind of momentum to work. So where in this bill lies protection for queer students? This bill would undeniably leave queer students in an educational environment where their identity isn't welcome and where they have no support in the face of discrimination. As legislators, you have a responsibility to show up for all of your constituents, including the thousands of queer students in New Hampshire public schools. If your goal as a legislator is to truly support free expression while also supporting your constituents, I ask you to please oppose this bill, as all students deserve to feel free and safe in schools, not just those whose identities you deem to be normal or ethical. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the members? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Bob Moore.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Bob Moore. I'm from the Seacoast, East Kingston, New Hampshire, and I'm a retired public school science teacher serving in 2 school districts between 1999 and 2023 in the towns of Pelham and also Litchfield. My time as an educator was a rewarding one, and I operated in the arena of academic freedom. I felt as though I was able to not be challenged on that freedom. HB 1792, or the Charlie Act, as it is proposed, prohibits the instruction of LGBTQ plus and critical race theory ideology. The definition of CRT, as it has come to be known in the 1980s, is a framework that examines racism embedded in societal systems. As an example, redlining was a practice once used to discourage minorities from obtaining real estate in neighborhoods with homogeneous populations. Between the 1930s and the 1960s, the Homeowners Loan Corporation and FHA created residential security maps, which were used to deny loans in or redline specific neighborhoods, a policy often driven by racial discrimination. The practice was outlawed by the Fair Housing Act of 1968. To share this practice was legal at one time in the history of the U.S. should be up to the instructor. The education of this history is not indoctrination. It's simply a part of our history, a history that these practices were once in play and affected the livelihoods of many Americans. A public school instructor should have the academic freedom to share this history if it meets the standards of a social studies curriculum. If students are preparing for an AP exam and they are prevented access to important information that can help them prepare for the exam, then that is a disservice to the students and it handcuffs the instructor. With regard to LGBTQ plus education, to bring up in a class that, for example, a writer, actor, or important historical figure was gay or lesbian is just information that describes a figure's personality. These are and have been there have been same-gender couples that have contributed to this country throughout its history.
It's 30 seconds left.
To offer a more complete education, whether it be a historical perspective or gender preferences in a relationship, is information that is based on reality and prepares students to learn about living in a complex world. It offers a student the knowledge and human perspectives to be able to think for themselves. The idea of academic freedom is to allow students to openly discuss ideas in a classroom, to do that safely. This is not indoctrination. It permits the student to consider ideas and to grow from them, and then to discover who they are.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is why I oppose HB 1792, the Charlie Act.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions, Senator Altshuler?
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Moore, for your service in teaching. I appreciate that. So in your opinion, would this bill impede the ability for teachers like yourself to talk about why things like the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974 had to be enacted, and what the history it was of why women were not allowed to have bank accounts or to own property without a cosigner? That differentiation of like the why, not just that it is, but why weren't we allowing access to the financial markets to a particular gender?
Yes, yeah, or minority background, right.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that that there should be a freedom to discuss these so that students can learn from themselves how history was plagued with problems or problems that needed to be solved. And, you know, how did those problems get resolved? Are they still a problem today? You know, we're supposed to learn from our past, and that kind of learning is supposed to take place in a classroom, in an academic freedom where these ideas are discussed between students and teacher, and to be debated, and then for the student themselves to critically think for themselves, you know, what is right, what is wrong, and how could that affect me? How can that affect my neighbor?
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. Yeah.
James, I think it's Mekim. From James Meckham.
James McKim.
Okay, welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is James McKim. I'm a Goffstown resident, a parent, past president of the Manchester NAACP, and an organizational consultant who's worked with schools across New Hampshire and New England. I'm here in strong opposition to House Bill 1792. I speak not just as a professional, but as someone who was a plaintiff in the federal lawsuit that has been mentioned here, where Judge McCafferty blocked the so-called Prohibition on Teaching Certain Concepts Act. That experience validated what I already knew from my work, how fear, vague language doesn't just chill speech, it harms real educators and exposes our state to costly risk. I agree that no child should feel inferior or be made to feel inferior because of who they are. But HB 1792 rests on a dangerous idea that the use of teaching pedagogies about critical race theory, LGBTQ people, and inequality equates to indoctrination. That's not happening in the classrooms and not what a confident democracy does. The real harm lies in how this bill tries to control pedagogy, the way teachers teach, by banning approaches that encourage discussion, empathy, and critical thinking. It blocks students from understanding that the lived experiences of people of color and other marginalized groups. Teaching about race, identity, and other protected classes is not ideology, it's education. It's helping students analyze evidence, compare perspectives, and see how history connects to today. When teachers fear that honest discussion itself is punishable, and I've seen that firsthand, they go silent. And when they're silent, students learn less, especially about those whose experiences have already been ignored. That's not protection, that's fear. And fear is exactly what President Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us against when he said, a democracy chronically fearful of new ideas would be a dying democracy. If we are truly concerned about indoctrination, the last thing we should do is to have government decide which ideas are acceptable. Education happens when we trust teachers to present facts, diverse viewpoints, and the full story, and we trust students to think for themselves. HB 1792 tells families like mine and students across the state that race, gender, and identity and sexuality are too controversial to discuss. That does not make us safer, it makes us smaller. I urge you to reject this bill, not because these conversations are easy, but because our children, our educators, and our democracy deserves better. Thank you, and I'm open to any questions you might have.
You did it in 3 minutes. Thank you very much. Any questions from the, oh, yes, Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. In your testimony, you mentioned the indoctrination, which is defined on page 2, beginning on line 7.
Right.
I understand that in references in RSA, that's the next paragraph below, and you oppose some of those, what's in that section of the bill. But I guess my question is, in respect to the indoctrination in general, do you oppose that being done in the schools?
I oppose indoctrination. What I do not oppose is exposing people to various perspectives. And part of the challenge is what I'm seeing in this bill and the sponsor's testimony is that there's an equating of helping students to actually have experiences that really deeply help them understand the other as being indoctrination. And that's what I'm really against.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The last one for today is Brian Hawkins. And you get 3 minutes, just like everybody else.
Okay, Madam Chair, I'll try to do it in less, not knowing what the rental costs at the State Library is these days. So for the record, Brian Hawkins representing NEA New Hampshire. We're here in opposition to House Bill 1792. I do have some written testimony, so I won't repeat that. I would say I do agree with the points raised by some of the educators here today around the vague nature of this bill and how it would be difficult to comply with. I'd also say and add to that that because of that, that's why we're concerned about the potential for subjective interpretation and therefore arbitrary enforcement of this bill. It was testified to in one of the previous cases, referenced that many educators, and I'm quoting, worry that the Banned Concept Act impedes competency-based teaching. They feel as though they cannot allow students to dialogue with each other, to peer review each other's work, or to let students lead classroom discussion because they don't know if student-driven learning will lead to discussion that could be interpreted as the instruction of a banned concept. And so my next point, I just want to say we do object to the narrative that the sponsor indicated that this is propagating around public education and the supposed existence of some kind of widespread indoctrination. It's a fictitious narrative, and it also is dangerous because of the consequences an educator could face with the violations of this bill. And I'll close with just Senator Prentice brought it up earlier in a question that she raised from the 2021 Teacher Shortage Committee. That committee did talk about this bill, and find it here. And in that report, that bipartisan report, they said the committee heard testimony that fear in teaching of controversial topics and critical thinking skills due to the passage of House Bill 2 in 2021 has placed an unhealthy pall over teaching and consequently influencing attrition and retention of teachers. And so we would respectfully ask the committee, let's not add to the pall these kinds of bills have created, and that the Shortage Committee found to exist when they heard directly from educators. And with that, I'll close my testimony and respectfully ask you to find House Bill 1792 inexpedient to legislate. And I'll hand in my written testimony.
Oh, Senator Sullivan has a question for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. In the last few bits of what you just said, you made an indication that these claims that there's indoctrination are fictitious. Don't you think that's disrespectful to the parents that have come to us as legislators and said that this is happening in their classrooms?
I'm objecting to what I think the sponsor was indicating, that there is some sort of widespread effort that was the narrative we heard in the House, and so that is what I'm objecting to. Certainly, there are avenues for parents to raise objections with something that is taking place in school, and if they feel that, they should certainly pursue those. But we don't think that this legislation is going to help not only parents, not only the students, but parents as well.
Any other questions? Senator Abbas?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. I asked this to the previous witness about indoctrination in general, and, you know, I understand the reference to the RSA's leads to a section that you don't support, but when it comes to indoctrination, you know, in the classroom, whether it's left or right principles, whatever it is that something that you would oppose being not permitted?
I think we need to make sure that the remainder of the bill is clear if we're going to be issuing prohibitions. And I think that's the trouble, is that the rest of the bill is difficult to understand, and as has been referenced before, vague. So it was referenced earlier. Obviously, there's not a complete First Amendment right to say whatever you want as a public employee, but as has been referenced in previous testimony, and in some of the litigation that's happened, it's important that it is clear when you're could be subject to be named in a civil suit or threatened with your license taken away, that you understand where the line is in these sorts of prohibitions. And we don't think that this bill does that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the hearing on 1792. Yes. We're going into recess, and the rest of you will have to come on next Tuesday. We cannot continue anything more today. I have a whole list of people who wanted to speak, okay? And I have your name. So we're concluding 1792. The hearing will be recessed to next Tuesday, and we'll take this up right at the beginning at 9:15. Thank you very much for coming. It was a long discussion, questioning. Pardon? You can email testimonies, absolutely. I have the list who wants to speak, and if you're not here because you have sent in a testimony, we'll take that into account.